Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Uplink podcast. Today, I'm talking to Koen Thijssen, founder and CEO of at Insify. We will talk about the peculiarities of the InsurTech industry and about his practices as a CEO. Welcome, Koen.
Thanks, Nick, for having me on the show.
You're more than welcome. I would say before we diving into all the hot topics and questions I have, please introduce yourself and tell us what did you do before founding Insify.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Insify, and it may be good to know with Insify we are working on making insurance for freelancers, entrepreneur, fast, simple, and fair. Um, Before starting Insify, and then I'll go all the way back. I actually started my career in London. I used to study there at the London School of Economics. And like many of my classmates in 2006, 2007, I went into the investment banking industry to a firm called Lehman Brothers. Um, if you remember 2008, that was an interesting year to join Lehman Brothers. So I was one of uh, the the employees who walked out of the London headquarters on September 15 in 2008, carrying a carton box, and that was sort of the start of my career. Um, Stayed in investment banking, but learned that I learned a lot there. But also saw that the people that I found most inspiring were actually the entrepreneurs that we worked for and who we advised. And so at some point I decided I want to become an entrepreneur. Um, but yeah, how do you become an entrepreneur? And I thought about this long and hard, and I realized you need about three things. You need a great idea, relevant experience, and some money to invest. And guess what? After 4 years of investment banking, didn't have any great ideas. To be honest, my experience for becoming an entrepreneur was not that relevant, and I hadn't really saved a lot of money either. Um, and right around the time that I was trying to crack this problem, I got in touch with Rocket Internet. Um, and I met with Oliver somewhere, and he basically saw, and I remember this from my offer email. He said, Rocket Internet, it's the Formula One of entrepreneurship. You'll learn how to build ventures here. It's like a great education. So I joined Rocket Internet, and indeed, it was very formative, and learned how to build ventures right from the ground up. Even did that in Myanmar. Some great war stories there. And at some point, after kind of figuring out how you actually build a business, me and two friends decided to have a go ourselves, and we left Rocket and we started Bloom, which was a subscription e-commerce business in the flower space. Must say, in hindsight, not the best idea, but definitely execution, and the team was really good. Um, and at Bloomon, as we scaled up, at some point I needed insurance for my business, and to be honest, that was the point that I started thinking about Insify, because that experience was so horrible uh, that I realized someone needs to do something about this.
Absolutely. That's also something I can share maybe a bit from the point of our freelancers. I think it's still like a very traditional industry. Sometimes you have to go to a certain contact person to get your contract or get like a more comprehensive consultation. And
Yeah,
often, especially like, I don't know, like freelancers and people in general, we are more used now to be at different locations and stuff like that.
yeah,
We're moving much more quickly as we are
yeah,
used to. So that model, for example, even in the insurance industry or also in the banking industry of having a contact person at a certain
yeah.
place is not that adequate anymore, I think.
No, I fully agree with that, and I remember what it was like for me at Bloemon. I remember that we got to this point that we started having a small team, and the small team we went through fairs to sell our subscription, and I realized that something happens to these people. We're actually responsible. We're an employer. We have obligations towards these people, And there's a certain risk, and that risk we can't handle ourselves. We'll need to insure that. And being a digital entrepreneur, like many of your freelancers, um, I went online to search for insurance, and I found out it was not possible. So I called an insurance company actually, and I said, "Look, I have a business, and I need insurance." And they said, "Well, we don't deal with customers directly. You have to go via an intermediary." So I really had that experience sitting in the office, somebody coming in, leather folder under his arm, sits down for an hour and a half long conversation, 2 cups of coffee, and that conversation is positioned as advice. But what really is basically two things. It's trying to establish a relationship and then scaring you into buying as much insurance as possible. So what you just shared, Nick, about what your freelancers are experiencing. Yeah, I had that firsthand as well. And I remember after that sort of advice, I also got an email, and the email had like 4 or 5 PDFs, and I needed to print those and kind of fill those out. But it was like these forms. It was like one form. They used it for our company, but they also used it for completely different types of companies. So it was this type of form where I felt really insecure filling it out. So I didn't know whether I was doing it correctly, and consequently, I also wasn't sure whether we would be insured correctly. But so this was sort of in my experience, and this really ultimately also led to the drive and inspiration to start Insify. This was part of it, this sign up process. But what was even more important was a few years later, the business was growing. We changed offices. We basically moved to an office next door, which was slightly bigger. And we were there for a month. And one day I come into the office and I noticed that the door is open, and I'm sure I've closed it. And what had happened, it was a burglary. And actually, so I go through the office and I find out 10 laptops are missing. And this was 20K in damage. And back then, 20K was really a lot of money. And so I also, we had investors. So I felt deeply responsible for losing 20K in a burglary. But I taken the precaution. I taken out insurance. So actually, it was the first time after 3 years that I needed insurance. So I called in. I made a claim, and I think within a week I got a reply, and we're rejecting your claim. Why are you rejecting it? Being a loyal customer, I've paid on time in full. They said, well, you didn't change. Yeah, you moved offices. You moved next door, and that doesn't cost anything to change, and wouldn't have affected your premium, but you didn't do it, so we're not going to pay your claim. And I felt screwed. I've been a loyal customer, always paid, and now when I finally need them, they're not giving the support that I need. But I need it the most because this was a big thing. But what was worse, a couple of months later, I think back to that burglary, and I realize I didn't change insurance companies, and I didn't cancel them. I didn't move to anyone else, and I realized there's this sector out there. What am I doing in this flower industry currently? There's this other sector called insurance. It's much bigger, and apparently there are large companies getting away with screwing their customers, with having a horrible experience at the sign up, at the start, all the way to when they should be delivering their support. And they're getting away with it. I'm obviously in the wrong industry. There's this massive opportunity out there, and I'm not being part of it. I need to go into insurance and see whether I can actually make a difference here. So that
Very
was sort
cool.
of this seed that was planted for Insify.
So you really felt the pains and the needs of your customers right now in general. I feel in general also in the insurance business, let's say, or in the industry, things are like changing time by time, especially nowadays where you have many possibilities to compare different providers and stuff. And you can see like numbers, how many of the cases they're actually paying and how many of the cases they're not paying due to rich reasons. But I guess like 10 years ago, that was completely different. I remember also, I don't know, like 20 years ago when I was a child, there were still like these contact people from insurances coming to our home and
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
trying to sell the parents everything. And I know so many people who at this time who did like a life insurance or other kind of insurances, and nowadays they are finding out basically with more information, oh my god, 5 years I'm just paying the interest or commissions of
yeah,
other people.
yeah.
I think it's super thrilling that you said you come like from a field of investment banking and now you landed in the field of InsurTech, let's say. Would you say there are some things you learned in these 4 years from your experience as an investment banker that you can apply to those markets?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, I wouldn't say directly. Um, uh, Maybe there are two areas. So
Mm-hmm.
the difficulty with disrupting insurance is that it's a regulated industry, very protected, and we need to work in that environment. So there are our partners sometimes, but the industry also needs to change, and that is a fine balance to keep. So we really need to improve this for the customer. We need to make it more transparent, more easy to use. We need to be more fair with claims. We need to lower prices because prices are entrepreneurs, freelancers are paying way too much for their insurance. But at the same time, we still need to maintain that balance. We can't just scream we are disrupting this space, but not play by the essential rules that are part of this industry because it's regulated. And I think having been in banking before, you have a little bit more appreciation for hey, where do I need to stick to the rules and where can I disrupt the space? I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one. I think building a company like ours also means that we do this being backed by investors. In our case, we've raised capital from, for example, Axel, a very well-known investor in the space. We've also we have several German funds, for example, Visionaries Club or Fly Ventures. We even have a former Formula One driver, Nico Rosberg,
Mm-hmm.
as an investor. Um, Getting that funding allows us to scale up, develop our product, and develop something that is currently not available. And it requires a lot of upfront investment. Convincing these investors to be part of our journey, I think, with the background that I laid in that first couple of years in investment banking, you have a slightly better appreciation for what are these people searching for, what is important for them,
Mm-hmm.
what do we need to give them in order to be enthusiastic about our journey and being part of that journey.
Mm-hmm. I totally get it. So in general, when it comes to insurances and also finance product, I think it's a bit similar maybe that you have for every country of like many regulatory requirements.
Yeah.
Would you like to see much more uniformity in a whole European market at least? And I was just wondering in that moment actually, is there something like a lobby, for example, where like insurance company are working together to achieve those goals, or is it more everyone is trying doing their own business?
I think there's some stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think and I think, by the way, this is an excellent question because when I just had my ID for Insify and I was doing my diligence on the industry, I spoke to a lot of people who'd been their entire lives in insurance, um, and I spoke about, hey, is this a local industry? Is this pan-European? How does it work? And what I learned is that people said, look, insurance, it's truly local. It's uh, it's um, uh, it's not a European industry. You have to go country by country, being very specifically. And I was a bit surprised by that because I saw on the other end all the fintechs coming to market, and they're really leveraging the ability to passport in Europe and actually build pan-European platforms. And what I realized is that most insurers have been around. The top 10 of European insurers have been around for 186 years. That's very old.
Crazy.
They haven't really updated their convictions and their notions of what's happening in the space. And I think they've just not seen that really that opportunity that there is to kind of build a pan-European platform, and that regulatory wise there is already that opportunity to do that. But they've been around for so long. I mean, their focus is often more about protecting their market share, protecting their profits, rather than looking at, hey, how can we still make this market more efficient? How can we actually drive down costs by, in our case, really building a pan-European platform?
Absolutely. Would make so much sense if they would more collaborate, at least like the startup that are coming up, but maybe it still takes some time probably till those markets really change in a sustainable way. So you're saying you're trying to like offer, you don't have that model of having like a contact person sitting in an office in every city, of course. So what would you say is different about Insify? What is like your approach to reach out to customers?
Yeah, so I think if you want to understand how we're different, it's important to understand what is out there. We've already shared our experiences and what it's like to get that sign up, and indeed having that local salesperson is often still what traditional insurers use. And if you think about it, so 186-year-old companies, think about the amount of legacy that they have in terms of processes, products, pricing, technology, of course, people. And if you think about what they're really good at, it's exactly managing that sort of distribution network of having offices all over the Netherlands, Germany, or France. If in every city having that little office of that person that arranges the insurances for the village and the businesses over there, and they're very good at managing that network. And it's a regulated industry. It's a consolidated industry. So if you look at in the Netherlands, there are just only four major players. Germany, there are more players, but it's also a bigger market. So there's not a lot of competitive pressure, not a lot of pressure to innovate and to make insurance more affordable. Actually, because it's a regulated industry and because it's somewhat actually protected, insurance has become a way of making money relatively easily, because you sell an insurance policy once, and then across the lifetime you're getting paid for it. You just mentioned it yourself as well, Nick. You have people who've signed up and find out that years and years they just continue paying commission. So I think insurance, what I see when I looked at an insurance is, when push came to shove, I, as an entrepreneur, didn't get the support that I needed. I saw an industry that basically had lost its sense of purpose. Because if you think about it, entrepreneurship is about taking risk, and insurance is about sharing risk that you can't take as an individual business or as an individual freelancer. But instead, selling insurance is more a pretext for making easy money these days. So I think, how are we different? To get to your question, I think first and foremost we put the customer first, and that's, what does that customer need? Insurance that it's simple, fast, and fair. And that means we need to do about 3 or 4 things different, and we need to do them right. So what we need to do is, in essence, we need to automate everything, because automating it makes it instant and it makes it much more customer friendly. Second point is, we need to price risk more accurately. Why is that important? Because you don't want to overpay. And that same goes for automation. Huh? Automating it makes it cheaper. as opposed to someone spending 1 or 2 hours with a customer. If it's automated, you don't have that cost, and therefore the insurance premium can be a lot lower. We need to detect fraud because there is still a lot of fraud in this industry, and again that drives up premiums. And detecting that allows us to keep premiums a lot lower. And we need to make sure that we have a great claims experience, because the moment a customer walks in and they've had an experience whereby they need their insurance, it's our job to make sure we keep the customer going and we get them back on track. And I think our first response is not, hey, how can we get out of this claim? How can we find a clause in the contract to say, hey, we don't need to pay out this one? But our first response is, how can we help? And I think if you think about all of these things, so it's how are we getting there? So of course, technology is an important one, but it's also a mindset and a cultural thing that is very important in driving that change for the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially what you also say to like determine in every case which are like what's the concrete amount that makes sense to be insured, because not freelancers, they have different risks. If, for example, I'm working, I don't know, as a strategic management
Yeah,
consultant, my risk is a lot higher, and the effect on a company can be huge
yeah,
comparing to a graphic designer or something,
yeah. Very true.
when
Very
it
true.
at least when it comes to the risk, and yeah, basically the impact
Yeah.
of your decisions.
Yeah,
I
it's actually
think
very funny, by the way, what you're sharing there. Because look, I'm not from the industry. Going into the industry, I thought those insurers were super sophisticated. Years and years of data and insights, statistics. How can I compete with it? And at some point, we started looking at the pricing engines of and the pricing models of our competitors, and we thought was super sophisticated, and we did an analysis, and we thought they would have for a given set of professions there were 299 million different pricing possibilities given the amount of variables they were asking for, so tremendous. And then we started checking, and we realized only two variables mattered, and that was industry and that was revenue. And what that meant was, and that comes to your exactly the point that you just made, was an IT professional who works at the code, critical code at a bank, would have the same price as an HR consultant, or even a secretary, and they would have again the same price as a graphic designer. And it's all business services, all the same price. And I realized, hey, this industry is not as sophisticated as we thought it was. And actually, there are a lot of people overpaying for how risky they truly are.
absolutely. I think often they are just like making advertising with some numbers saying you insured up to that amount. And often when it comes to liability insurance and stuff, it's a super high amount. But I think sometimes it's something that happens in our mind, that actually the amount is so high, we really can't imagine how high
Yeah,
most of the people,
yeah,
at least, I can't imagine what I could do with like 50 million or something in my
yeah,
liability insurance. And so we're already kind of out there. We just like, I don't know, when it's like directly target, but we need that amount because that and that can happen. We're like, okay, then let's do it. It's too hard for us to imagine. So I think it's really a big part of insurance provider to actually really calculate in the precise industries and professions how high the amount should be and what's realistic
yeah,
in that matter, right?
yeah, true.
I think in general, that's also something wanted to ask you. When you have a product where that needs a lot of explanation, obviously, and it's not a product people see and it's clear to them at the first sight what it is about, it's super important to gain the user's trust. Do you have any strategies in general for companies you recommend to do that, especially when you're also entering like new markets or new countries?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I really love this question. And when in preparing for this talk, this conversation, it made me think about the very first pitch deck that I made for Insify. And I had done a lot of analysis on the industry, and I remember at some point it had a slide which was about trust, and I had found data and analysis that had been done by an agency on the trust in the insurance level. And actually, in preparation of this conversation, I looked at the deck again, and I have some statistics for you.
Mhm.
So, 53% of customers don't trust or are not sure whether they can trust insurers. 59% of customers are not convinced insurers act in their best interest. And 81% of customers don't believe that insurers use clear and understandable language. Overall, if you rate insurance and compare it to all other industries, as like technology, healthcare, food, retail, it's the industry that ranks lowest in terms of consumer trust. And that's even below, for example, transportation or energy.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought it was really interesting. So it's an industry that we collectively don't trust. We use it because we have to, but we've all decided we don't trust these guys. Um, and yeah, then the question becomes, which is really difficult, how do we change that? And what really stood out for me, if you look at all of these insurance companies, they have these great marketing campaigns about what they do and how well they protect you. And then there's reality, right? And the reality that we feel as consumers. So for us, it's it's not a branding exercise that, hey, we need to build that trust. For us, it's really showing that we are different and delivering on it consistently, and having kind of trust that as we do that consistently, uh, word will get out. And here again, there's again tension, because um, and for us this is also a journey. And as we further progress in that journey, we can do more and more vis-a-vis what we can do today. But for example, to give you, it took us a year and a half before insurance companies allowed us to handle our own claims. Now, since we started handling our own claims, suddenly we can make sure that they're handled in a much better, much faster way. And I think ultimately that is key, because that ensuring that the trust grows as customers experience our claim service is truly key, because that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in general, when it comes to like new markets, also like new markets, like the banking sector, luckily we have like great new banks and it's so easy to pay everywhere in the world where you want to, comparing to the system we had in the insurance industry. I feel as well, we had our banks at the city we're born, and then we keep that card until we
Yeah,
die in
yeah,
many cases. And luckily there's also changing a lot of things. And what I wanted to say, it's like also I feel customer service there is key, especially when you have a problem with your banking card or with your insurance, and you can reach out to people and speak to them at the same day. Because especially I think it matters with insurance, you're really waiting for a response, and you don't want to wait
yeah.
two weeks and be uncertain about your claim.
Yeah, and I think that's true. That's super important, and I think that's also something. As part as we grow, we make a massive effort to speak to a lot of customers. So on a daily basis, we have customer panels to understand what are their concerns, what are we doing well, what can we improve, how is their um, how was their experience. Um, and we learn a lot from those experiences. And I think one of those examples that comes forward is if you're an entrepreneur and if you have a claim on your business, your personal income, your personal sort of financial safety is suddenly at stake, and you need to have support immediately. And I think it's a very delicate moment in an entrepreneur's sort of journey. There's a certain level of vulnerability in that, and I think we need to be mindful of that to make sure that if the customer comes in, our reaction is again, how can we help? How can we support? As opposed to a traditional insurer saying, hey, how can we get out of this claim? Or let's ask you 20 questions to make sure it's not fraud.
Absolutely. Was that also something in like the first year, or when you actually were building the products, that you already were thinking about what actually does the customers want? How were they involved in the whole product building process? Because I can imagine with an insurance, I have, at least in my mind, it's like you need to build the whole product and stuff, and then you can reach out more and more to
Yeah,
customers. It's not like when you're building a software or stuff, you
yeah,
can do
yeah,
usability
yeah.
tests. Or is that also possible with Insify in the beginning?
Yeah, look, what is helpful is that every entrepreneur needs insurance in essence. So there are a lot of people that you can just speak to and ask for their experiences, and and you discover we got lots of interesting insights from those. I think one of those that we learned, and that was very particular for example, the Netherlands, is if you're an entrepreneur and you suddenly become unable to work, you lose your source of income. So you need a certain level of income protection. So if I'm an IT professional, I break my wrist and I can't code for half a year. Yeah, can I bridge that with my financial means, or do you need to cover that risk? And we learned that 75% of professionals didn't have a sufficient safety net in place for if such an event would happen. And if you ask those customers why, two reasons came forward. One, it's a massive hassle to get the insurance in place, and then it's extremely costly. And then I spoke to the insurance companies, what they were focused on the product development, and if they
Hmm.
were focused on this problem, because there's a massive opportunity, a whole group of people not being insured. Nobody cared about that problem. They were actually, it was very funny. They were busy on providing free yoga classes via the app to improve their NPS, but they were not solving the hard problem, which was how do we make this insurance accessible for large groups, easy way, and make it a lot cheaper so that a lot more people can have a financial safety net in place. Nobody was cracking the hard problem, and I think um, this is sort of the information that you get from those interviews, and suddenly you realize, hey, there's actually a large group that has a real problem. Maybe we can do something about it. And it's really
Absolutely.
funny because today that's one of our most successful products.
Amazing. So I think it's super important to not lose touch, I don't know, touch with the users in the end. But I think it's a typical problem of many startups in the beginning, right? You have that idea, and then you like, I don't know, do all the fine tuning with your product, with your services. You want to have like that button super fancy and stuff like that. And sometimes you don't have the concrete needs anymore in mind. Especially, what would you say in the first year after founding Insify? In the first year, what did you help you to really
Yeah,
grow the company? Where
yeah,
was this point where things were kind of getting in the right direction?
yeah. Look, I think what my learnings before Insify was really around the importance of having a great team, having a great team early on, not waiting to you can actually raise a lot of capital and then spend money on finding those people, but search for those. right from the start. And that's, I think, that has made a massive difference. So looking back, working at Bloemon, working at Rocket Internet, even working in investment banking, I think the team that I work with today is by far the best team that I've worked with so far. If I look in terms of grit, motivation, but also sheer intellectual capital and sheer sort of capabilities. And I think uh, as a business, we were able to attract that because we focused on getting that type of talent in right from the first start, right from day one. And those people will really help the company to accelerate and grow. And yeah, we're benefiting from that every day.
Mhm. So, if might ask, how big was your team in the beginning, and how
Yeah.
quickly it grow over the last
Yeah.
time?
So in the beginning, we were about 7, 8 people.
Hmm.
Um, and that grew to 14. And then we did our Series A. That was back in December 2021.
Hmm.
And then over the course of a year and a half, we grew to 60, which we are today. So really, yeah, that investment allowed us to accelerate. But getting and we've managed, and that's also quite great. So getting the first, keeping the bar high on the first sort of 8 team members. That's a challenge because you're small, you have a lot of promise, a lot of ideas, but not necessarily a lot to show for. But then if you go from 14 to 60, if you have a lot of rapid growth, keeping the bar high is also a challenge. Yeah, and that I think has worked out well for us.
Absolutely, and especially it's also not so easy all the time to maintain that kind of culture and not lose the people who were there
Yeah,
in the beginning. I think from 14 to 16 it's okay, but there are many startups who are raising also as well from like 20 to 400 within
yeah,
like a year, and
yeah,
they really have massive challenges
yeah,
often to keep the people from the beginning. And
yeah,
as you said, let keep the bar on the same
yeah,
level basically. I can imagine as a CEO, you probably have like a lot of decisions every day to make. So I was like super interested in how you actually prioritize your decisions. Do
yeah,
you have a clear plan every day? What
yeah,
is more or less
yeah,
expecting you, or some departments you're working in
yeah,
on at certain days, or how
yeah.
how do you organize yourself?
Yeah, I think sort of there's a level of how do we organize the company, and then I need to organize myself around that. And as a company, we're using the scaling up methodology. At some
Hmm.
point, a company scales and you realize, hey, I actually need a bit of a rhythm to manage this and to operate on. And I kind of stumbled on scaling up by accident and realized, hey, I have a blueprint of how we can operate, and there's a book, and I can give the book to my employees, and then they understand how we're kind of organized. And in essence, what we do is we once a year we have an annual planning. We set the goals for we look at our sort of longer term goals as sort of our BHAG, our 10-year sort of North Star goals, and then we say, okay, what do we want to achieve then this year to get closer to that ambition. And from that, we have a quarterly planning. We say, okay, if this is what we want to achieve in the full year, what do we want to achieve in the quarter? And then we bring that back. So we make our OKRs, our quarterly goals, and every week we report on how do we track against those. And every day I start my day with a huddle to see, okay, what am I going to do to make sure I hit my goal for the week. But by doing this in a very structured rhythm, we always as a team know, hey, where do we want to go this year? Where do we need to go then this quarter? And what do I need to do this week to get closer to that goal? And it gives, so very funnily, we don't have any pivots, or we have very few changing priorities over the quarter or in a given month.
Hmm.
It's very much, okay, this is what we've aligned on, this is what we agreed on, and for the next 3 months, for the next quarter, we'll just execute on it. And then it's about then what does that mean for me? It means that as the CEO, I typically spend my time on sort of three topics nowadays, which is one, people, and I shared how important it is to have the right people on board and have the right people doing the right things. I think that's a big part of my day. Given the industry in which we are, and given we are venture backed or VC backed, of course, spent a lot of time on managing our external stakeholders and managing our investors, but more importantly, managing, for example, our risk carriers, the relationship with the regulator, uh, those kind of topics, and then um, also contribute on the execution. So I like to of all the challenges that we have in this quarter, of all everything that we want to deliver on, I like to also own part of that work, because at Insify we believe that every leader uh, needs to make impact, and that means also being in the doing part of the dirty work yourself as well. So I try to make sure I have time for that as well to contribute.
Very great. And also, I think it's important to kind of see what are like the operational problems and challenging the employee might have at a certain
Yeah.
moment. I think if you lose like all of that knowledge and all that connection
Yeah.
to the operative business, it might be not so great in the long run as well. I was super interested when you said like you basically make long-term plans and long-term decisions, and then the whole team is committed to that. Would you say, in general, also due to that more long-term approach and less changing priorities within the team, you need to have like less meetings when it comes to that?
In theory, yes.
Mm-hmm.
In practice, I'm not sure whether we fully gotten there. I think the most important benefit is, look, what is really frustrating if you're working in tech or if you're working in any team, to be honest, that you spend a lot of time and also some of your personal time where you've been working late evenings to ship a certain feature. And right before you get there, someone of management says, hey, we're going to pause that feature and I actually need you to work on something else because we found something else that is actually even more important. So can you please do that instead? And I think that's super demotivating. And of course, I would be lying if I said this never happens on our end. But I think overall we have very few of those instances. And in that sense, so it gives a lot more, um, in a certain sense, peace of mind. It gives a lot more focus, and knowing that what you're working on is actually what we'll need to finish, and what's going to stay in focus. That priority is not going to shift.
Absolutely. I think also part of the life as a founder is also like to network and sometimes go outside
Yeah,
the box to see like
yeah,
to kind of get like that in German we say bird perspective,
yeah.
wider perspective on things what is happening on the market. How do you integrate like networker and talking to other founders in your all day life? Is that really something that you prioritize as like part of your job, or is that something that's more happening occasionally within I don't know, conferences and stuff you're
Yeah.
invited to?
Yeah, I must say nowadays it happens a little bit more occasional.
Mm-hmm.
When I founded my first business, I was much more going to these conferences and these founder meetups as we're trying to kind of figure out how to build a company, how that works. And I think from going through that journey before, you've also kind of built a group of people around you that are going through a similar journey. So as opposed to being at very large events, I tend to reach out more one on one and try to catch up, and then also go deep on, hey, I'm facing this or that challenge. How, how are you guys
Mm-hmm.
solving that? So I nowadays I do try to try to stay away from large events where you meet a lot of people, but not necessarily manage to
Hmm.
really go in depth. I'll try to focus on those people that I know and that I know are going through similar journeys with similar challenges.
Okay, so it's much more purpose driven, you would say, than
Yeah, I would say.
before, where maybe just like connections in general were important.
Yeah, true. And of course, a few times because of the role, a few times a year you are at bigger conferences and you do meet a lot of new people. You get inspired, um, but ultimately, I think it's also my task number one is also making sure that we build a great company and that we execute on that vision that we have. And I also want to be very mindful of not being too distracted or too inspired to forget about actually executing.
Absolutely, totally understandable. Do you use in general like any tools that maybe not everyone know yet to facilitate your workday life at Insify? Do you have, I don't know, a specific metric or stuff that makes your daily life easier?
Yeah, so I must admit I'm in reality often a late mover when it comes to a lot of tech and tools. So I use Slack, which is my sort of the main tool that I use on a daily basis. But I'm afraid I'm not the best source of inspiring new tools.
Slack, I mean, Slack is our basically, we do everything in Slack, right? We have the whole community in Slack. So I think it's definitely one of the best tools in general when it comes to communication. And especially because you can really decide which notifications you want to get in which channels and stuff like that. So also for us, it's like really essential when it comes to our working daily life. And as the last questions, I would like to know: do you have like any inspiring books or podcasts you're currently reading that you would like to share with our guests?
Yeah, so there's one book that I actually read a few years ago that is many of the insights that I incorporated into the culture of Insify when we started thinking about that. And that was the book of Angelina Duckworth, if I uh, pronounce it correctly, and it's called Grit. And grit is about passion, perseverance, and hard work. And I think she very convincingly argues that those three ingredients whereby hard work is even double as important as the first two ingredients, is what has a very high correlation to ultimate success. And um, I think I'm very much convinced by this concept to the extent that grit is the core value that we have in Insify, and it's one of the most important values that I look for in any candidate that I speak to. So I always want to hear, hey, where can I see passion? Where can I see that someone persevered when the going got tough? And where can I really see that you have that hardworking mentality that just doesn't give up and gets the challenge done? And I think that's also, if you think about it, this is what you see in a lot of professional athletes, for example, as well. Um, and yeah, so I think that's a very interesting book to read
Absolutely.
to be inspired by.
I don't know it yet, but we're totally putting all the resources you mentioned in the show notes for our listeners.
Very good.
Koen, thank you so much for being here today. I'm pretty sure there are great insights that the other people are looking forward to hear. And I wish you a great afternoon and speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Ciao.
Ciao.